There's some work that was done by a researcher by the name of John Flynn years ago. This is sort of seminal research. And it was a series of rooms that were identical architecturally, but they were lit in different ways. And the idea was that they would bring subjects in and they would ask them questions about different impressions that they got by looking at the lighting. So one of them might be, let's say, for instance, would be private versus public. So when you walk into, say, a space that's lit very generally, like you were saying, the big white box, that space feels more public. It doesn't feel necessarily intimate or private. It feels more public. But if you were to walk into that same room and the walls were a little bit darker and there were pin spots of light on each table, like you might see in a restaurant, all of a sudden you have people gathering around these little pin spots of light, and it feels somehow like it's more private.
Oh, that's the phototropic thing. I got you. Yeah, where you're huddling in towards the candle, literally.
Right, around a spot of light. So it turns out that just the lighting was enough to make some pretty large differences in these impressions that people were getting. And one of them, another one that he measured was relaxed versus tense. So you mentioned, a room typically that has a very broad source of soft lighting tends to feel a little bit more relaxed. There's nothing about it that makes you sort of feel tense. But if you have sort of sharp pin spots of light raking across surfaces and maybe at odd angles, all of a sudden that raises sort of more of a height of tension in the space. So those are some of the things he mentioned. So you can use some of those things creatively. You can use them in the theater. They're used all the time that way to create drama. In architecture, you can create drama to a certain point, but you have to make sure at the end of the day that people can still do what they need to do in the space.
They can handle it over the long term.
Yeah, that's the difference between theater. Theater lighting is temporary. It's the kind of thing where you're doing it all for the effect. When it comes to architecture, people need to feel good in the space.
Function,
yeah.
When I mentioned that I was going to be chatting with you to some different people, they said, what's the background? And I saw you studied architectural engineering. Do most lighting designers come from architectural engineering? What's the profile, education, and interest background of the different people in your firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have folks from a bunch of different backgrounds. On the lighting side, I'm just going to kind of go through them in my head. We have folks from a theater background. So those are folks who had a technical theater, usually lighting design background in theater. We've got folks who have come from architecture backgrounds, interior design, architectural engineering, which is my background. We have several folks from that area. So that's kind of more of an applied engineering program, and there are several schools for that across the United States.
Do you feel personally more at home with engineers or artists? Because, I know there's a technical side, but gosh, it's also very creative.
I like to think of ourselves as consultants that the architects like to see. Oftentimes I feel like sometimes architects would rather do everything themselves, but I feel like when we walk in the door, they're excited about seeing us, which makes our job fun and it makes it enjoyable. I think there are some other consultants that are almost the architects see as a necessary evil, if you will. So maybe the HVAC guys and the structural guys can put constraints on the architects that they would rather not have.
But you're literally highlighting their kind of greatest work, yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of what we do is very visual, and a lot of what we do is we need to get our head around what the architect's vision is, really. So we have the sort of technical know-how. They have a vision, and I feel like we have the sort of creativity and technical know-how to bridge that gap and make that vision into a reality.
How early in the goings of a project, let's say it's new construction, are you brought in, and how early should you be brought in?
I would say we like to get brought in as soon as possible, as early as possible, especially when we're doing more daylighting work now, which we talked about from the
Unpack
facades
that for
conference.
me. What do you mean daylighting work?
There's been a resurgence of a desire to open up our buildings to use more light that is not generated.
But there's still a strategic component to that.
Exactly, right. And so there's it has a lot to do with the way the building is sited, the fenestration, the curtain walls, how those are designed. And there are a lot of ways to use the building materials and the building configuration to create a useful entry of daylight or daylight delivery system with kind of setting aside some of the worst parts of what we know to be of daylighting, which would be the glare from the sun and things like that. So daylighting really is the study of how to get useful daylight into a building and kind of set aside some of those liabilities, if you will, that can come from that.
If you took 10 projects that come to you guys, how many of them are we're going to build this thing and we want you involved? And how many are we're going to renovate this building. We want to make it pop a bit more. It's already there, but can you come in and clean up what's been done? What's the breakdown?
Yeah, I think it's probably right now, I'm going to say about 60% new work, and I'm going to say about 40% existing. There's been currently sort of a movement, especially in the hospitality area, to put new boutique hotels into existing historic buildings. So we've done a couple of those recently. Those are very interesting projects because I think in the whole sort of sustainability movement, one of the greenest things you can do is take a building that's already there and keep as much of it as possible and infuse it with new life. We also worked on a project at the University of Chicago. There was an ecclesiastical building. It was for the seminary. The seminary moved to new quarters, and the School of Economics moved into this building that used to be housing the seminary. So it was
that's ironic.
Yeah, completely different, exactly. Completely different use, kind of soaring roofs, but a table where people are going to get down to business. So we've seen a lot of that repurposing of architecture, and there are some architects that really specialize in doing that.
To what extent do you find yourself wanting to talk to an architect who's designing something and saying, if you'd put something here that was a bit rougher or stuck out this way, or I could really make that thing, because the surfaces that they're planning, right? I mean, it's going to be different shining light on masonry as on glass. How much do you find yourself wanting to do that, and how much do you succeed in doing that?
We do that quite a bit, but we try to do it in a way where we'll get the initial vision of the architect. So let's say the architect says, we're going to make this a stone wall, terracotta, or it's going to be marble, or whatever it happens to be. And we'll talk about a lighting effect, and out of that discussion, we'll have suggestions for maybe how they might modify the finish, let's say, on a stone wall. So they might want to hone the stone rather than have it be completely specular or polished. And that will enable a certain lighting effect. The other type of effect that we can do is by grazing a surface that's highly textured, something similar to, let's say, if you've seen the water tower in Chicago, just very roughly cut stone walls. You can do some very interesting things with light and shadow on a rough cut wall like that you just can't do on something that's smoother. So I think it really depends on our established relationship with our client. Some architects are very open to hearing about ideas that are going to make the building better from a lighting standpoint.
And others not as much.
And others, it's going to be polished, and you're going to light it the best way you know how, and it's polished, and so it's not changing. So at our best, I think it's a collaboration, a sharing of ideas that leads to a better end product. But there are times when the building is what it is, and we need to do our best job to render it in its best light. So.